Good morning, YouTube. Today we are talking about barn finds. I have a real treat for you all today. I've compiled my list of my favorite 10 barn finds, some of which I've seen in person or have some experience with. And really, barn finds are still everywhere you can find them. Jake has a Datsun rotting away in his yard. You leave a car in my barn for a couple weeks, it gets all dusty and it's probably worth more because it's in a barn, then I could sell it, right?
Well, I think barn finds are the coolest because they sit as they were born and they're stock, and they've not even been modified, they haven't been driven a lot, and like that's truly a treasure when you find a car like that.
So really, barn finds are everywhere, but these are some of the most epic ones that were at least rattling around in my memory, starting with the Cuban 300 SL Gullwing. And actually, I have a pretty direct connection to this car.
You do?
So it actually started as a race car. It was in a Cuban Grand Prix of some kind.
Right.
But then when Fidel Castro came to power the whole Cuban Revolution, basically the doors slammed shut and the car couldn't get out. A very rare Mercedes 300 SL, the iconic Gullwing doors. My all-time favorite dream car.
I feel like this should be like at the top of your list as like the #1 barn find.
It is really freaking cool, this car. But it actually was stuck in Cuba and then used as a daily driver until the 1980s. No. Maybe some engines got swapped out of the firewall, was all very much modified. And then it was sitting, rotting in a field underneath banana trees for almost 40 years.
Wait, the SL Gullwing?
Yes.
What?
Yes. So it was actually discovered first in the 90s. Jeremy Clarkson did a show where he went to Cuba and they filmed actually this car. And then it was found again actually by my friend Miguel Lorente. He was living in my basement at the time. This is around 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I could find pretty much anything for this car on the shelf right now wherever we stop.
I doubt you can find your screen display.
Well, and he left in a Mercedes diesel wagon to go on a Pan American expedition, drove from Kansas here to the tip of South America. Now, he actually got in a major accident in South America and couldn't quite finish it, but during one of the stops, he actually flew to Cuba for 2 weeks and rediscovered the car.
What? This is an actual photo of the car.
That's it.
Sitting, and it looks like it's on a movie set.
It's absolutely real. He was able to sit in it, kind of open the doors, even though it was all mangled, the drivetrain long gone, every panel rusted, ruined, and it sat there for a very long time because you can't get the car out. The way Cuba and politics and the embargoes, they could not get this car out. But actually, very recently, they did. They actually hacked it up into pieces, got it back over to Europe, and here's how it looks now.
What?
Yep.
They did that?
I don't know how much of it is the original car, but talk about the coolest story ever for a 300 SL. Not only does it have the racing pedigree, I believe it won the race in '58 before Castro came to power.
So that's a big deal.
I know. And then sat on an island rotting away for 50 years. Well, it was actually driven for a while, but basically a barn find, or under a banana tree find, I suppose.
That is gorgeous. It's kind of the color of a banana right now, but those models, those years, you can kind of paint that color, and it looks fantastic.
Yes. Now, the next one I actually saw sell.
I don't want to see any more. I just like that one.
Well, this is really cool. A 1948 Tucker Torpedo.
Fine.
This is another dream car of mine.
An actual barn find?
Yes, it was.
Because didn't they only make like, what, 50?
About 50.
Okay.
A little less than 50 were surviving. And this one was actually in a garage, kind of a barn, but somebody had the intention of restoring it. They never did. And people would come by and offer money to try and sell it. He would never sell it. Of course, the guy eventually died, so the estate, they were able to sell it at auction.
They didn't paint it in that color originally.
That was the color, yes. So they brought it out of this garage where it had been sitting forever, and then it sold for $797,000 in 2011.
Right.
And I was there. I got to watch it sell.
You did?
Yes.
I feel like now it would be probably $5, $6, $7 million. What do you think it would be now?
Oh, maybe two. I mean, in this condition,
way more.
Two
than
or
that.
three, probably.
So it's not fully restored. This is how it sold back in 2011.
It's sold as a derelict. It has since been restored, but these are really neat cars. They were so far ahead of its time, and there's a lot of story with Tucker and his company and what happened to it, whether he was over-leveraged and just not financially strong enough, or the big three conspired to take him down because his car was so good ahead of its time. But really, it had some issues. It had a helicopter engine in the back that was adapted. Well, it didn't really work very well in automotive applications. It was, you know, pretty unreliable apparently, not that we really know. But there were so many safety innovations with this car. It was just so far ahead of its time with the way he thought of things. Like the middle light would steer with the steering wheel with Cyclops eye.
Such a great idea.
Just a lot of cool stuff with it, but that is the ultimate barn find Tucker right there.
I don't think you can top this. On your, there's nothing.
No, well, how about a Cobra and a Ferrari 275 GTB alloy body.
Is that a real Cobra?
Not only is it real, but this is probably one of the most epic barn find YouTube videos of all time.
It's a real Cobra.
That was a real one. Yeah.
Because there's like a million recreations out there.
So not only
What?
that, but the Ferrari 275 GTB and an alloy body. So the story goes, this guy had an amazing car collection, but in 1991 he had a mechanic, the only mechanic he would ever trust to work on his cars.
Yeah.
He died tragically in an accident. And the guy's like, I don't want anybody else working on my cars, so he
Right.
just parked them all. Parked them from 1991 until 5 or so years ago.
Can you imagine walking into a garage, just finding that, not knowing it was there?
Well, how about if your YouTube channel is called Barn Find Hunters? Like, he jokes in the article that this should be his last episode ever. Of course, he's continued on to have many other barn finds. It's a
Yeah.
great YouTube channel associated with Haggerty, but this is definitely his most epic find of all time. Not only is it a Cobra, it's a big block Cobra.
Oh, yeah.
And a Ferrari 275 GTB, which is really cool because Carroll Shelby built his personal Super Snake to beat this Ferrari. I guess his attorney drove
Yeah.
back in the day. So he built his own Cobra. We've seen that sell a couple times at Barrett Jackson for
Right.
$5 million. So these were the two big ones. They're worth over $1 million on their own, but the other cars in there, it totaled $4 million worth of
What?
cars in this one collection that was sold. They hadn't moved since 1991 because this guy was so sad about losing his mechanic.
Right.
But I imagine if something happened to the car wizard like that, I would be very upset myself and maybe do this. I
Yeah,
don't know.
of course. There's a sentimental value attached to it.
Yeah, so kind of a sad story. But the next one, this is another Shelby, a 1965 Shelby GT350, and it was found in an abandoned lake house that was falling down, sort of a
Really?
mid-century-ish lake house. Another epic YouTube video where this Shelby was sitting in there along with a Fox body, and it was found because somebody answered a Facebook ad of a vintage like Shelby steering wheel for sale.
Really?
Not mentioning the car at all. The guy went out there, apparently the owner of this car in the lake house had died, and whoever inherited it was just kind of clearing things out. The house was just crumbling but full of random junk.
Unbelievable.
And the guy came, saw this car,
Yeah.
saw it was real, a numbers matching, but rusted, falling apart just like the house 65 Shelby GT350.
Does it say what he bought it for?
It's an undisclosed sum because it wasn't sold at auction,
Right.
but chances are it was a lot of money.
But so what do you do in that situation when the person that owns the property has no idea the value of the car? Like, do you just lowball them because you can, or do you kind of come up in the price and be fair?
I think in this instance, you don't leave until you have the car in your hands. Sort of like when I got that Countach
Yeah.
and the Diablo Roadster.
Right.
I was not leaving until this
Yeah.
guy had the check, I had the titles, the cars were gone because
Right.
I knew I needed to have it at that instant.
Right, but there's so many situations where it could be a family member, you know, a daughter or something that has no idea what the value
Right.
of this car is.
But this is just dumb luck. A guy answering an ad for a steering wheel ends up finding one of the coolest Shelbys.
That is
Easily worth over $500,000,
Oh, yeah.
probably even in this condition.
So do you leave it or do you do a full restoration?
Oh, I think this one was a little too far gone maybe to kind of do a preservation. It was pretty
Yeah.
rusty in a lot of places, but I don't know the fate of it. It's just an amazing YouTube video, just
yeah.
going through the house itself too. Another epic YouTube series on Drive Tribe was with the very first Land Rover.
How do they know, like, is there actual VIN number 1 somewhere on it?
Well, they knew because of the VIN plate or the license plate, JUE 477.
Okay.
And they thought that the car was long gone. It was the very first one in 1948 that was built, and then it was used to work. So it was supposed to be shown to King George in 1948, but he didn't look at it, so it was just sold off to a farmer, used for decades as his beater, and then thrown into a barn where it sat until very recently.
I love there's an entire book.
Oh, yeah.
JUE 477.
Just finding it the
Right.
way it was I mean, it was a very classic, amazing British countryside barn find,
Oh, yeah.
and it was rusted and basically falling apart. But they did an amazing restoration on it where they didn't restore it, but they used as much as they could. There it is after, actually. That's how it looks. So all the body panels they could preserve, they preserved. They obviously had to put a new frame underneath it and
Right.
such, but they were able to rebuild everything they could, preserve it as much as possible.
I like that they kept it that stock look. They didn't do anything to refinish it. Maybe just a clear coat, like a matte clear coat over
I don't
it.
even think that because it's an aluminum body.
It's beautiful.
But then they took it on a cross country, I believe in Africa drive,
Yeah.
as a celebration for Land Rover for their anniversary. So a really cool story there,
I mean,
really
should you
cool
drive
video.
it though, or should you put it in a museum?
Well, I think it's in a museum now, but they just wanted to prove that this truck is very capable.
Right.
It was great marketing for Land Rover. They had their newest, greatest stuff, and then the old school stuff that could still keep up.
That's beautiful.
Perfect marketing ploy, but an amazing story as well. And this one I know you'll like. It's a 1969 Charger Daytona.
Oh, baby.
The Winged Warriors.
Yes.
These were the homologation special because they were racing in NASCAR. They needed to build so many of these to sell to the public. In 1969, it was the Charger Daytona. In 1970, it was the Superbird.
Right, but they made less of these, I think, because back in the day, they only had to make, like, what, 500 of them?
Right.
Was it actually found in a barn like this?
Yes. So the story goes, it was parked for 30, 40 years because the person was driving it. It's a 440 Daytona. He got in a little accident. He bumped the nose cone and was embarrassed by it. He wanted to fix it and then drive it some more, but he never fixed it because of that small accident. The slight bump there in the nose.
It's a big bump,
That's why he parked it.
Yeah.
Planned to fix it, never did, and it just sat forever. But he had painted flames down the side as well. I mean, these things were just totally worthless back then, so it makes sense. I mean, it's great that he even parked it and preserved it in the barn in the hay bales there.
Beautiful. Oh my, do you like Superbird or Daytona better?
Well, a Superbird is cooler just because of the graphics, I think, and the meat meep and all that stuff with the horn. Daytona, obviously, rarer and much more valuable. It sold for $90,000.
That's it?
That's it.
Stop.
Yeah, but this was years ago before they really came up in value. Like we had a Hemi Superbird sell for $1 million at Barrett Jackson recently, and that sort of set the world on fire.
Oh, yeah.
But this was a few years before that when these things were still somewhat reasonable.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
And the owner who bought it, the new owner, plans to preserve it, which is really cool.
I love your picture of you sitting on the wing of your Superbird. Because what is it, like tied into the frame? So
Yes.
How much can it hold? How much weight?
Well, there's a picture with 3 women sitting across it.
Ah.
Yes.
So what are they, like 100 pounds each? So 300 pounds?
Yeah, they are very, very sturdy. Yes. So the next one is a Lamborghini. So this is a Miura. This is the first supercar, a lot of people consider it, because it's a mid-engine, exotic, gorgeous thing.
They had one of these at the F1 Concourse?
Yes.
So gorgeous, but terribly crazy low to the ground. Like, I can't believe how low it was. Like, how do you even get into it? You have to, like, do, like, a limbo to get in the seat.
Right. But
so cool.
Worth millions and millions of dollars, these cars nowadays. This was Ferruccio Lamborghini's answer to Ferrari when he went to his doorstep, and he had a Ferrari himself. Before this, Lamborghini had only built tractors. And he knocked on the door and wanted to fix some things with his Ferraris. He knocked on the door of Enzo Ferrari, thought he'd give some friendly advice since he was a mechanic and engineer himself, and Ferrari slammed the door in his face and said, you stick to building tractors, I'll build cars. And so he set about to build cars, and this was his first big product, the Miura, and it was epic.
It was.
Mid-engine production car, which Ferrari was not doing it other than their race cars, obviously. But this one, well, it was in Illinois, in the Chicago area.
In Evanston?
Yes.
Okay, so that's like northeast. Wow. What was it doing there? That's like the salt capital of the world on the roads. Like, you would never even want to drive a car like this on any streets around Chicago.
Right. It was this guy's daily driver, except for winter. He wanted to preserve it,
Stop
obviously.
it. This is his daily?
He was an engineer and a mechanic, and I think he owned an alarm company.
Who does he think he is? Big baller.
Well,
what?
these weren't, I mean...
Daily?
He bought it used. So it wasn't...
Doesn't
It was still
matter.
expensive, but it wasn't ridiculously expensive back in the 70s and 80s. But around 30 years ago, he just parked the car because it needed some brake or clutch work, and then he never got around to fixing it.
Beautiful. This put Lamborghini on the map.
So,
this car's epic.
yeah, they see the V12 there. But he did eventually get old and put into the nursing home, I believe, and so they started dealing with selling all of his stuff, but this was the big deal, that this was just sitting in his garage. And I believe who got it was somebody related to the family, somebody who really appreciated it, which is really nice. He was able to buy it from the family, but keep it in the family, and recommission himself. He didn't restore it, he just kept it sort of as is, as sort of a driver, and did a big unveil, I think, at Pebble Beach or Monterey at one point. And it is in beautiful shape, even though it is, you know, it's sort of a driver, sort of a ratty Miura, but still very cool. I like that
because then you're not as nervous if you do want to drive it, which you should once in a while, just for a little bit. But that's gorgeous.
Yeah, easily worth $2 million probably.
Oh my gosh.
Now, this one is a very interesting car because it's a Ferrari Dino, which recently a very nice viewer gave me the chance to drive one. They are really cool cars. But back when the Dino was a relatively new car, someone had drove theirs to dinner, supposedly.
Okay.
And they came out and their Dino was gone. It was stolen.
What?
They turned it into insurance and collected the check.
Yeah.
And it turned up 4 years later, buried in a yard.
Wait, did the actual owner, like, make up the story that it got stolen? No way. Who buries it?
That's
Why would you
the
do
belief,
that?
is he needed a check.
Okay.
And so he needed to stash the car. He had somebody take the car, and then they stashed it in what was probably an old swimming pool that they filled in.
Right.
But they tried to preserve it.
a good
They
idea.
stuffed the exhaust pipe with something to keep
Right.
worms from getting into the engine. They really tried to, they wrapped it up in a tarp and
Yeah.
all that stuff. But it sat in the ground for 4 years. And somehow it didn't get absolutely ruined because it was a drought during that period. So it actually was dug up. A year later, it was restored, and here's how it looks now.
It's gorgeous. It doesn't look like anything happened to it.
Right, but
you've buried how many cars?
I have buried 3 now.
Yeah,
Well, there's
so-
one currently in the ground over there.
What's like the most dangerous part about burying it?
Well, I sat inside with one of them. It totals out the car every single. That's why it's incredible
Like, so you're
that this
talking
Dino
about
survived, because
The rain.
the rain getting in
Yeah.
there and the weight of the dirt just crushes it.
Right.
But the first one I did, Chrysler LeBaron.
Yeah.
Oh, you're gonna break my windshield. Oh. Oh no. Now,
Amazing car.
the window did get crushed, the windshield, because it's convertible,
Right.
and the soft top couldn't hold it.
Okay.
But it barely rained. It was a very dry year. The car came out of the ground, looked pretty good. Started up. The
Were
next
you
year,
surprised? Did you think it was going to start up?
no, it was shocking.
Yeah.
So immediately we buried the next car, a Range Rover, modern Range Rover.
Right.
Oh, this is so dumb. This is totally moronic. No, he's not supposed to go on that side. You bought a life insurance policy on me before you did this, right?
Much more
Like what
sturdy. 2004, 5. Much more sturdy car
Right.
structurally, which that held up, but record rain. So
Okay.
it was absolutely ruined. It was like sitting underwater,
Right.
completely trashed, ruined, totaled.
Right.
And then this one, well, the BMW back there, we'll see what happens.
There we go. I don't know how many of you have owned a BMW before and gotten so angry at it that you've wanted to do terrible, terrible things, but I'm sure there's a lot of you. And honestly, this is so satisfying to watch right now. This X6M be buried.
Disaster.
Yeah.
There's a lot of rain here in Kansas, so I feel like it's not going to start. I'm calling it right now. That BMW is not going to start. Do you think it's going to
well,
start?
or it could come out and be like this Dino someday. No, it won't. That car's an absolute piece of crap, which is why I buried it. But moving on, the next car is a Bugatti that was actually thrown into the ocean.
Why?
A 1925 Bugatti.
Someone threw it, like pushed it into the ocean?
Correct. So the story goes, this is a 1925 Bugatti Type 22 that was a race car. But
Yeah.
this playboy race car owner got into some gambling trouble and lost his car in poker.
Huh.
And the person who got it shipped it home, but he didn't have any extra money to pay the import duties of his home
Okay.
country. So he left it, he abandoned it. And these people were just like, well, what the hell do we do with this thing? Pushed it off the dock. A Bugatti race car
What?
pushed off the dock and sat at the bottom of this bay
I would
ocean
like take
for
it as payment. Like,
50,
okay,
60
you
years.
can't pay me. I'm just going to drive it home to my own house.
But what are you going to do with a 1925 Bugatti race car? It's just in the way. It was like they just got rid of it.
It's
It
amazing.
was stuck in limbo
Right.
basically.
This sounds like some old movie, like winning in
It's-
poker.
No, it really happened. So the car was pretty old at this point. It was 9 years old.
Right.
So in that time it was ancient history and probably not worth a whole lot. So yeah, they just pushed it in.
That's a beautiful. So where is it now?
So 75 years underwater, they finally brought it up.
Yeah.
And then sold it at auction. It brought $370,000.
Not bad.
Now there's no restoring this car.
Right.
It's basically static art. It's an
Right.
art display of a
Right.
Bugatti race car. Obviously, if it were intact with the story and everything else and still usable without the
Right.
water thing, it'd be worth a lot more. But just as art conversation piece, I think it's absolutely epic.
That's a beautiful car. I love it.
And finally, another race car, and this one I think is the most epic, not only just because of price, but the story of tracking this car down. So it is a 1939 D-Type Auto Union, so the preamble to Audi. It was a
Okay.
race car that Hitler sort of commissioned, even though it
Yeah.
wasn't the Third Reich's car. It was commissioned to break speed records. This one went 185 miles per hour. in 1939. That's absolutely insane, but also it was a gorgeous car, just a sort of bullet-shaped, gorgeous thing that, well, shouldn't have survived World War II.
Right.
Most cars were scrapped for the war effort to build anything. Germany was
Right.
completely reduced to rubble back
Right.
then. But people who built this car, engineered it, they loved it so much that they hid it in a railway tunnel in East Germany, and it was preserved, it was saved.
Good. I'm glad they did.
But
That's
the
epic.
story doesn't end there, because East Germany went to Russia.
Right.
So the Russians found it in the abandoned railway tunnel.
The Russians.
They took it,
Yes.
they sort of used it, raised it, reverse engineered it, and then it was broken up in parts all over Russia.
Yeah.
So it was actually an American who set about finding this car. Apparently, he got some word about a few pieces showing up somewhere.
Sure.
And with the fall of the USSR, he was able to go to Russia.
Right.
And since he spoke fluent Russian, he was able to track down these pieces in different places and basically gather up most of the car.
Wow.
Where they could put it back together.
Right.
They had to remake the body and a lot of things, but most of the car was found and they were able to put it back together, restore it. And here it is.
That is so cool. You know what? It's like you can find any car, but when a car has an amazing story like this, it just pushes it way over the top.
So this was going to sell at auction for $10 million was the estimate.
Okay.
But it didn't. It actually found its way back to Audi in their museum in private hands
Okay.
for an undisclosed sum, but definitely north of $10 million.
That's amazing. That story is so cool. I can totally see people doing that back in the day.
So that's my top 10 barn finds.
I feel like I've been shorted though, because there is no, at least like a GNX. There's like so many cool barn finds. Or the last Grand National, do you remember that one?
Yes, the
That's
last
sold?
Buick Grand National. I know that's April's favorite car, but yeah, that wasn't a barn find though. That was somebody's bedroom they converted to house the last Grand National. Basically, drove off the factory line, then they put it in their bedroom. It
Yeah.
had no
It
miles
still
on
had
it.
all the plastic wrap
Yes.
on it, like brand new in the wrapper. Even the guys in the assembly line like signed the actual car, like
Mm-hmm.
on the engine bay and everything like that. Like they made a sign in the back that it traveled with. It's really cool.
Yeah, it did sell for multiple six figures, but it was a bedroom find
Well,
in perfect
A
condition.
bedroom find.
Yeah.
Well, the guy I think that sold it said he's going to get $200,000, and it went for $550,000.
Yes.
Imagine selling that one.
Right.
My real question is, on your top 10 list, which one would you want in your barn?
The Gullwing, the very
course,
first one.
Of course.
Yeah, it's just an epic story and an absolutely epic car.
Where is it right now?
It's in Europe. Yeah,
We got to get it over here.
definitely.
We got to get more views.
Thank you so
People
much for
afford it.
watching. Yeah, a lot of Good Morning YouTube videos need to go up to make this. Yeah, subscribe. Yeah, if I get 2 million subscribers and millions of views per video, I could maybe justify it.
Maybe justify a trip going over there to look at it.
And he spoke fluent Russians, and he spoke fluent Russian. Where I imagine somebody couldn't take it, but
Right.
the cat is.
Is it distracting?
Let's get you down.
Hi, Neelix.
You need to get down, Linux. You're gonna knock something over.
Good morning, YouTube. I'm here. I'm a man.
Did you just have to check?
I
You just had to look.
I just didn't know how to start.
Gorgeous.
That,
They had one at the F1 concourse. I can't believe how.
What in the hell is the cat doing?
It's playtime.
It was halfway up the door frame.
Seriously,
Yeah.
it was halfway up the door frame.
But I imagine if something like that happened to the car wizard, that would be similar. Okay, we're not using similarly.
Is that a word?
I don't know.
I don't think it's a word. Similarly.
Yeah.
Similarly.